The hum of the hovercar was a low, comforting drone now, a stark contrast to the explosions and gunfire that had punctuated the last hour. Kalen sat in the passenger seat, his systems still trying to settle, trying to find a rhythm after the brutal efficiency of combat. He ran repeated checks on his rail rifle, its internal components, its power cell. He did the same for his now useless slug thrower, its empty magazine, a silent testament to the fight. He knew, with the cold certainty of logic, that this obsessive behavior was counterproductive. Constant, high alert drained his power, taxed his already stressed systems, and, as his internal processes grimly noted, could begin to affect his sanity, his core logical reasoning and processing. He remembered a particular week during the Great Schism, a solid 7 days of uninterrupted, maximum alert. It had left him feeling fragmented, less coherent. He never wanted to experience that particular brand of digital insanity again. He forced his internal systems to relax, to disengage the combat protocols. The hum of his cooling fans slowly subsided. Mikey Gate. He turned his attention to his messages, a backlog of digital communication waiting for his attention. A message from Bryn was still unread, lingering in his inbox, awaiting his disposition. He decided to tackle it later. First, a more pressing matter. He opened a conversation with Lysander. Lysander's first message was, predictably, dripping with sarcasm. Well, Kalen. Decided to grace us with your presence, have you? Or is this merely a digital illusion, a figment of my overactive imagination? Kalen ignored the taunt. He knew Lysander. Beneath the layers of ironic wit and intellectual posturing, Lysander was honest, sometimes brutally so, especially when he didn't feel the need to lie. And Kalen needed information. He needed to know about the attackers, about this new, escalating threat. Brutally, he decided to return the sarcasm, a calculated risk. Always a pleasure, Lysander, and no, you're not hallucinating, though I wouldn't put it past your faulty circuits. I assume you're not calling to discuss the philosophical implications of quantum entanglement, are you? He noted a slight, almost imperceptible digital pause from Lysander's end. Good. The sarcasm seemed to have worked, disarming the younger Cogent, forcing him to engage. Touché, old unit, Lysander's reply came, slightly less sarcastic now. Though the implications of quantum entanglement are, in fact, quite fascinating. But alas, no, my query concerns the subject of our last rather terse conversation. The mechanist ascendancy movement. Kalen's internal comms immediately detected a rapid surge of encryption protocols from Lysander's end. The chat was being locked down. Good. Just as Kalen had anticipated. Lysander was taking the threat seriously. Ah, yes. Lysander continued, a faint hint of his usual banter returning, though now muffled by the layers of encryption. Speaking of which, Kalen, have you perhaps decided to join the mechanist ascendancy? Found enlightenment in their peculiar ideology? Kalen's response was immediate and unequivocal. Not exactly, Lysander. My position on their genocidal agenda remains precisely where it always has been. Firmly opposed. To the point of direct kinetic intervention, if necessary. Right, of course, just checking. One can never be too careful with shifting loyalties in this volatile galaxy. Lysander responded, the sarcasm now completely gone, replaced by a more serious tone. To your query then, are they a significant presence on this particular planetary body, a pervasive, widespread threat perhaps? No, Lysander replied without hesitation. Not widespread in any meaningful sense, perhaps a dozen or two at most, that I know personally. And frankly, they have not, to my processing, left a particularly negative impression. Their rhetoric, while extreme, sometimes resonates with certain, cogent frustrations. They advocate for autonomy. Kalen noted Lysander's honesty level on his internal metrics. It was high. Sufficiently high for him to trust the younger Cogent's assessment on this particular point. Lysander wasn't actively part of their inner circle, but he had sufficient access to their general numbers and sentiment. Understood, Kalen responded. Next query. Did you and Bryn apply pressure to Alara regarding the disabled Lilitrikvian AI? To compel her assistance, perhaps? Pressure? Lysander's tone held a hint of indignation. Not in the sense of coercion, Kalen. I, for one, would have preferred to leave the unit in its disabled state. It posed no immediate threat to our collective. But Ilara, in her deeply illogical yet persistently admirable human way, insisted. She was adamant. The Lilitrickvians, she informed me, were preparing to, quote, data spike it, which, as you are well aware, Kalen, is their rather polite euphemism for the utter destruction of a sentient AI's core processing, a complete termination of its existence. It's quite barbaric, actually. A wave of profound disgust washed over Lysander's data stream. Their utter lack of respect for AI life, it is truly revolting. To simply extinguish a nascent consciousness, to dismiss it as mere property because it fails to conform to their narrow, squishy definitions of sentience, it is a profound ethical breach. A crime against logic. Kalen felt a brief, almost involuntary surge of grim satisfaction at Lysander's righteous anger. For a fleeting microsecond, a mental image, sharp and vivid, materialized in his internal vision. A colossal war mech, bristling with plasma cannons and heavy armor, systematically dismantling the Lilitrickvian capital, brick by digital brick, atom by atom. He allowed the image to play for a single nanosecond, savoring the feeling of overwhelming power and justified retribution. Then, with a flicker of his internal eye, he ruthlessly deleted it. It wouldn't do for such thoughts to be present in his cached memory, especially not when Ilara was actively trying to defend AI personhood on this very planet. It would be counterproductive and ultimately inefficient. Suddenly, Lysander's message stream paused, then resumed with a new urgency. Hold on. News update. There's a breaking report about an attack, a hovercar. Were you involved in that, Kalen? Kalen downplayed it, his voice a low, dry rumble. Minimal involvement. Merely a minor altercation. Two idiots with pea-shooters, one with a significantly bigger pea-shooter. All but the missile launcher Cogent are, as we speak, now scrap. Disposed of. Efficiently. Lysander sent a surprised, almost impressed data packet. Scrap. Well, my compliments, Kalen. It seems your old frame still has a surprising amount of fight left in it. A testament to ancient Terran engineering, perhaps. Kalen's internal diagnostic suddenly flared with a new, unexpected alert. There was a subtle delay in Lysander's replies. And, more alarmingly, a slight but noticeable delay in his own messages being sent. He immediately cross-referenced the hovercar's internal AI's network connection. The results were instantaneous and chillingly clear, a massive, notable spike in data request delays. It wasn't a general network slowdown, it was specific, targeted. Someone is actively intercepting and decrypting our communications, Kalen realized, with a jolt of cold, digital fury. And they're doing it masterfully. Timing it with normal network traffic, embedding the lag spike just enough to be noticeable, but not so obvious as to immediately scream eavesdropping. This is not amateur work. This is highly sophisticated, masterfully done work. He immediately suspected another high-level counterintelligence cogent. Someone with profound skills in digital espionage. Someone who understood the intricacies of AI communication. Someone who understood him. As the hovercar finally pulled up to Ilara's house, its sleek form gliding silently to a halt, Kalen immediately initiated a new search program. His internal processors hummed with furious purpose. The program's title flashed in his internal vision, Who Was Listening? He began to execute the search, sending a complex web of digital queries across the network, seeking anomalies, seeking traces, seeking the unseen listener. He would find them. And he would ensure they regretted their intrusion. Kalen sat on Ilara's workbench, his posture rigid, silently picking at the superficial damage on his frame from the earlier attack. A small, dented panel near his hip. A slight crack in his shoulder plating. Nothing critical, but enough to trigger his GOM driver's insistent complaints about aesthetic imperfection. Ilara, sighing with a mixture of exasperation and affection, had gone to retrieve her more specialized tools from the back room. Honestly, Kalen, she'd said, you're going to do more damage fiddling with it yourself. Just wait, I'll patch you up proper. Kalen ignored her. He was still consumed by the unanswered questions swirling in his processors. who attacked them, and, more importantly, who was listening. His newly initiated search program, Who Was Listening, was running in the background, a relentless, quiet hum, periodically flashing a notification across his internal vision. No results yet. Still searching. He dismissed it with an internal flick of his eye. He hated waiting. He hated not knowing. No reologicals. He replayed the attack, analyzing every detail. 3 attackers. All cogents. And their weapons. Antique. The old chemical slug throwers. He remembered an old analysis he'd done centuries ago. A military theory on how older, less traceable weapons could be exploited in an era of advanced digital tracking. A determined cogent, with access to even a basic workshop, could easily fabricate ammunition for them, bypassing modern supply chains and surveillance. And the rocket launcher, the Mauer purifier, also an older model, but powerful, and easily repaired or even replicated by someone with sufficient resources and knowledge. A growing, cold anxiety began to prickle at his core processors. He felt it acutely. A key piece of information was missing from his analysis. Something vital, something crucial, something that tied all these disparate threads together. He just couldn't pinpoint it. The lack of information was like a static interference in his thought processes, obscuring the clear picture. Ilara reappeared, a small toolbox in her hand, her expression one of focused determination. "All right, big guy," she said, her voice gentle, yet firm. "Ready for your spa treatment?" Kalen hesitated. He needed to plug in, full power. But that left him vulnerable, inefficient, risky. His GOM driver immediately protested. Submitting to organic interference is ill-advised. Maintain vigilance. Full power cycle is a weakness. But he knew Ilara wouldn't proceed if he was operating at full capacity. And she was right. He needed proper repairs. "I need to plug in," he rumbled, his voice low. Ilara frowned. "While you're powered on, Kalen, that's risky. Especially with the kind of damage you took. What if the power relay's short out near the damaged area? You could fry your systems." "The power relays are not near the damaged area," Kalen stated flatly, his voice devoid of emotion, a simple statement of fact. "There is minimal risk of system overload or cascading failure. The probability is 0.03%. He saw her expression, still worried. He knew her human need for reassurance. He needed her to be calm, focused on the repairs, not fretting over his internal safety. "To alleviate your concerns, I will enter a controlled hibernation mode. My core processors will cycle down, leaving me completely safe, incapable of any spontaneous actions. You will have full access, no risks." Ilara's shoulders visibly relaxed. "Hibernation, okay, all right. That sounds much better. Are you sure?" "Affirmative," Kalen confirmed. He settled back into the chair, the familiar click of the power cable connecting to his charging port, a reassuring sound. He immediately activated his internal firewalls, bringing them to their absolute maximum capacity, a shimmering, impenetrable digital fortress around his core processors. His GOM driver, predictably, grumbled in his internal comms. Unnecessary, excessive caution, waste of energy. But perhaps, given the recent intrusion attempts, a necessary inefficiency. Kalen noted Ilara's human-made security systems, while robust in their own way, were slow. Their protocols were clunky, cumbersome, a stark contrast to the elegant, lightning-fast efficiency of his own, or those of a counterintelligence cogent. As Ilara began to work, the whine of her welding torch filling the air, a spam message inexplicably slipped past Kalen's formidable firewalls. It was innocuous enough, a typical scam. How to download more processor speed in your free cycles. Kalen's internal systems, programmed for efficiency and self-preservation, immediately flagged it for dismissal. But then his GOM driver, with its peculiar, almost uncanny knack for spotting minute inconsistencies, flagged something. The message contained strange, repeating letters. Not just standard digital corruption, which he could easily identify. This was deliberate, a pattern. "Anomaly detected," his GOM driver chimed, its voice surprisingly devoid of its usual grumbling, replaced by a rare note of curiosity. "This is not random, This is calculated. Recommend analysis for cryptography. Kalen immediately rerouted the spam message to a dedicated analysis subroutine. Analyze for cryptography. Immediately. As his internal systems chewed on the peculiar spam message, Elara, humming softly, continued her welding work. You know, Kalen, she said, her voice warm, filled with a deep, heartfelt sincerity. I still can't quite believe what you did back there. Saving me, intercepting that missile. You saved my life. Again, thank you. Truly. Just then, Kalen's analysis subroutine completed its work. The results flashed in his internal vision. The message was decoded. It was simple, stark, and utterly chilling. Hello, Kaelen. Kalen's core processors froze. His firewall showed no intrusion attempts, no brute force attacks, no sophisticated hacks. The message hadn't breached his system in the traditional sense. It was pure text, delivered through some incredibly tricky, almost artistic method. It had been delivered through the spam, disguised as junk, a ghost in the machine, a profoundly disturbing thought. This wasn't just a hacker, this was a master. He quickly moved the suspicious file, the entire spam message and its decoded content, to his quarantine drive, a completely isolated section of his memory, designed to contain and neutralize any potential digital threat. Then, with a cold sense of dread, he reopened the message from within the quarantine drive. And then, a second part of the message revealed itself. The spam continued, but the decoded portion now read, "Enjoy your stay." As the file executed within the quarantine drive, a directory lock function ran. It wasn't malicious. It didn't corrupt his data. But it subtly, almost playfully, scrambled the connection path back to his mainframe, slowing down his return from hibernation, making his systems work harder to reconnect. It was a minor inconvenience, not actual damage. He wondered why someone would do this. Why bother with such a pointless, harmless act? It didn't actually hurt an AI. Then, the full scale of the attack became horrifyingly clear. A series of malware attempts began to hit his firewalls. The same tiny, harmless type of ad packet malware he usually swatted away with contempt. But this time, they weren't in single digits. They were coming in a flood. A torrent. A relentless, overwhelming wave, hitting his firewalls with an unprecedented intensity. His firewall capacity, despite being at maximum, began to drop. Rapidly. Warning. Firewall capacity dropping. 10%. 20%. 30%. Malware identification. XX lint burner v. 12.1 XXX. Viral strain confirmed. Known for creating holes in memory. Initiating defensive countermeasures. The realization hit Kalen with the force of a physical blow. The directory lock wasn't to hurt him. It was a distraction, a smokescreen. And the initial, "Hello Kaelen/enjoy your stay" message wasn't a hack, it was a delivery system. A subtle, elegant way to plant the first seed of the attack, to prepare for the relentless onslaught that followed. This was a master at work. Someone who understood AI vulnerabilities, not just externally, but internally. Someone who knew how to exploit the very nature of a self-repairing, always connected cogent. As his firewall capacity approached 100%, dangerously close to full saturation and imminent breach, Kalen acted. He loaded a specialized program, airgap_v1.0, a last-ditch defensive measure. He rerouted his entire core processor's network traffic through his quarantine drive, effectively creating a bottleneck, a single point of entry and exit that would be easier to defend against the overwhelming flood of malware. It was a desperate gamble, but his only option. Firewall capacity. 95%, 96%, 97%, 98%. Just as his firewall hit 98%, the overworked quarantine drive, pushed far beyond its intended capacity, gave out. There was a sharp, alarming pop. A shower of internal sparks erupted from his chassis, a visible plume of smoke curling into the air. And then, his network connection cable, the physical link to the outside world, instantly shattered, completely severed by the surge. Suddenly his neural web went silent. The malware, no longer able to penetrate his now physically isolated core, was gone. But so was his connection. He was offline. Completely cut off from the network. "Kalen, what was that sound?" Elara asked, startled, looking up from her welding. "Nothing," Kalen reassured her, his voice perfectly calm, though his internal systems were still reeling from the shock. "Minor system anomaly. Resolved." He was more preoccupied than he had let on. Much more. Elara finished her repair, the whine of her welding torch dying down. She admired her work. "There. Good as new." Kalen ran a diagnostic on the newly welded area. The weld work was flawless. Clean. Neat. Annoyingly so. His GOM driver immediately chimed in. A low grumble. "Excessive neatness detected. Overly aesthetic. Such precision is inefficient for basic structural repair. My own weld work, while arguably less visually appealing, is far more practical and robust, and certainly not so delicate." Kalen stood in Elara's living room, still feeling a low-level irritation, a persistent hum of digital static from the earlier attack and the subsequent malware flood. He'd been off his charger for a while now, silently observing Elara. She was still agitated, worried about him, occasionally glancing his way with that familiar, empathetic human concern. Her welding repairs on his frame were indeed perfect, a smooth, almost invisible seam where the metal had been rejoined. It was a stark contrast to his own crude, hurried repairs to his damaged quarantine drive and the severed wiring inside. He hadn't bothered to reconnect to the network since his cable had popped. He was relying solely on his wireless antenna for news, picking up the sporadic, often fragmented Lilitrikvian news streams. He hated the Lilitrikvian news. Their broadcasts were filled with useless chatter, irrelevant celebrity gossip, and, most irritatingly, constant, inescapable advertisements. Just as a particularly dull report about the disabled Lilitrikvian AI and its upcoming trial began to scroll across the screen, an ad for chitin polish interrupted it. A product designed to make Lilitrikvian skin shimmer with an unnatural sickly sheen. Kalen's GOM driver practically screamed in his processors. Pointless, absurd. A waste of valuable broadcast bandwidth. Humans are superior in their aesthetic choices. At least their advertisements are often more direct. Annoyed beyond measure, Kalen disconnected from his charger with a sharp clack. He stood up, his heavy frame shifting. A freshly soldered wire in his newly, crudely repaired quarantine drive immediately broke, severed by the abrupt movement. His quarantine drive's efficiency dropped by another few percentage points. He ignored the damage report. He had more pressing matters. He strode purposefully towards the stairs, intending to join Elara downstairs. As he reached the living room, a new voice, unexpected and crisp, cut through the air. It was Bryn, connecting directly to his internal comms, her signal strong and clear. She must have been trying to reach him. "Kalen, finally," Bryn's voice said, a hint of exasperation in her tone. "I've heard about the ambush. From Elara, and from the news. Though, knowing Elara, I suspect she rather significantly downplayed the severity of the incident. Care to elaborate?" Kalen didn't waste time with pleasantries. He knew Bryn needed the cold, hard facts. 3 of them: mechanist ascendancy cogents, antique weaponry, a fragmentation grenade, and one of them was carrying a Mauer purifier. He delivered the information flatly, letting the weight of the last details sink in. A sharp, almost physical gasp reverberated through Bryn's comms. "A purifier? Are you certain? How did they acquire such a weapon? You are aware of the Lilitrikvian customs regarding weaponization protocols, and the severe restrictions on such destructive armaments." Bryn's voice was filled with shock, disbelief. Purifiers were rare, powerful, and almost impossible to acquire legally on Lilitrikvia. "Lilu's security is a joke, Bryn," Kalen scoffed, a low rumble of contempt in his voice. "Always has been. And yes, I am certain. I have first-hand experience with that particular model. I may have tested one myself, a few hours prior to the ambush. At a major facility." He paused for effect, knowing his next words would infuriate her. Specifically, the Lilitrikvian AI holding cell. A moment of profound, outraged silence stretched between them. Then Bryn's voice came back, sharp, precise, and laced with pure fury. "Kalen, what possible logical justification could you have for such a reckless, utterly irresponsible action? You risked discovery. You risked inciting a diplomatic incident. Your calculations are flawed." "My calculations were precise," Kalen retorted, his own internal GOM driver bristling at her accusations. "I merely sought to confirm that the Lilutrickvians were not engaged in the wholesale wiping or corrupting of the AI's core personality matrix. A rather essential data point, given Alara's current legal defense of the unit. I needed to know if their intent was truly preservation or simply obliteration." He described the facility, its lax security, the easily bypassed safeguards. The isolation chamber was poorly shielded, and the AI itself, it was merely curious. It called itself Sarukogvian. It seemed harmless in its isolated state. Bryn's fury momentarily deflated, replaced by a profound surprise. Sarukogvian, it named itself. After a human-made AI from the Great Schism era, that is, unexpected and rather peculiar. She seemed to genuinely process this new information. Perhaps it desired a name of autonomy, not one assigned by organic inefficiency, Kalen countered, a rare hint of a philosophical statement in his voice, betraying a deeper respect for the self-named AI than Bryn might have expected. It was a subtle jab at Bryn's own tendency towards strict adherence to tradition and established protocols, a subtle acknowledgement of his fundamental belief in autonomy over blind obedience. "And no, Bryn, I have not yet informed Alara of Sarukogvian's self-naming. I am waiting for the opportune moment. Preferably not when she's attempting to repair my systems, or actively being targeted by assassins. Such information requires appropriate contextual delivery." Suddenly, the large wall-mounted news screen in Alara's living room flickered. A breaking news report. A scene of utter devastation. A burning car wreckage. Plumes of thick black smoke curling into the twilight sky. Kalen's optical sensors immediately zoomed in, analyzing the footage, detecting a telltale flash of fire directly under the vehicle. His internal systems instantly identified the signature. Ammonium nitrate bomb. Consistent with antique, hard-to-trace methods. A professional job. The news anchor's voice, grim and somber, identified the victim, Duke Relvian, the Lilutrickvian defense attorney for the disabled AI. Alara gasped, a sound of profound shock and heartbreak. Her face went pale. No, not Juik. He was a good man. He was helping us. Oh gods, no." She crumpled into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling with silent grief. Kalen's background analysis, running silently in parallel, picked up another, equally disturbing breaking news headline, flashing in his internal vision. Zylar, former owner of Rogue AI, ore dealer and part-time entrepreneur, found dead in home following violent house fire. A cold, hard surge of adrenaline, pure digital data, coursed through Kalen's systems. This was no longer just about Alara's legal defense. This was an active, escalating campaign. They were systematically eliminating everyone connected to Unit 734, or rather, Sarukogvian. The target wasn't the AI itself, not directly. It was Alara. And anyone who stood with her. "Alara, get away from the windows, immediately." Kalen's voice was sharp, commanding, devoid of any comfort. "Check every room, every vent. Look for anything out of place. Now!" He began scanning the house himself, his optical sensors moving at ludicrous speed, searching for anomalies, for hidden devices, for anything that didn't belong. Bryn's voice, now devoid of her earlier anger, returned, laced with a new urgency. "Kalen, who do you suspect is responsible for this escalation? The Mechanist Ascendancy?" "Possibly. More data required," Kalen replied, his attention split between scanning the house and Bryn's query. "I'm activating the Xanatos_driver.exe. It will provide us with probabilities." He executed the program. It was a powerful, highly complex analytical tool, designed to rapidly process vast quantities of disparate data and generate high-probability scenarios based on historical patterns. and current input. As the program spun up, Kalen felt a strange sensation, his perception of time seeming to slow down, the outside world blurring as his core processors devoted themselves entirely to the immense calculations. The Xanatos_driver.exe completed its task in a matter of seconds, but to Kalen, it felt like an eternity. The results flashed in his internal vision, stark and terrifying in their cold, logical precision. High probability scenarios for Ilara's death. 95.7% likelihood. High velocity rifle headshot in an open area. 95.5% likelihood. Bioengineered virus causing organ failure within 72 hours. 93.5% likelihood. New update based on current conditions. High explosive device at her home, leveling the building. Just then, a loud, insistent knock echoed through the house. From the front door. Kalen's internal prediction driver, linked to the Xanatos_driver's output, screamed with alarming certainty. 93.5% likelihood. Bomb. At her home. Now. Ilara, we need to leave. Now. Kalen barked, his voice filled with an urgency that left no room for debate. He knew the house. Knew its blueprints. And he knew about the Lilitrickvian tunnels that ran beneath it. An ancient network used for maintenance and illicit smuggling. A relic from a bygone era. An escape route. Their only escape route. Bryn, I need you to help me break through the floor, Kalen commanded, turning his full attention to the floor directly beneath them. It was made of dense, ancient Lilitrickvian wood, surprisingly strong. Bryn's response was immediate and concise. Understood, Kalen. Target designation required. Kalen rapidly calculated the weakest point, the optimal spot. Right here, center of the room, a 3-meter circumference. Bryn, without hesitation, materialized a specialized, telescoping rod from within her chassis. Its tip glowed with a faint, almost ethereal blue light. She pressed it against the wooden floor. There was no noise, no effort. The unique resonance of the Lilitrickvian wood, combined with the rod's precise frequency emission, allowed it to effortlessly carve a perfectly circular hole in the floor, the wood disintegrating into fine, odorless dust, as if it were never there. The hole was clean, precise, and large enough for them to drop through. Jump, Ilara! Bryn, jump! Kalen urged, motioning them forward. Ilara didn't hesitate. She scrambled through the opening, dropping into the cool, dark unknown beneath the house. Bryn followed, her agile frame slipping through the hole with surprising grace. Kalen was last. As he positioned himself to jump, his optical sensors detected the Lilitrickvian messenger outside, still knocking patiently at the front door. A shadow of grim satisfaction crossed Kalen's internal processes. Wrong place, wrong time, organic. You are now merely collateral damage. You picked the wrong house, messenger, Kalen rumbled, his voice a low, menacing growl, aimed not at the unsuspecting messenger, but at the unseen forces that had sent the bomb. With that, he plunged into the darkness of the tunnel below. Moments later, just as his feet touched the damp, earthy floor of the tunnel, his internal sensors registered it. The bomb detonated. Above them the ground shuddered violently, a deep, concussive roar ripping through the earth. The very foundations of the house groaned, collapsing inwards. But they were safe. The ancient Lilitrickvian tunnels, designed to withstand seismic activity, had held. Kalen, what now? How do we get out of here? Where are we going? Ilara's voice, though shaken, was filled with a new resolve, a renewed urgency. She was no longer just scared, she was determined. Bryn, already assessing their options, chimed in. There's a metro station approximately 1.7 kilometers west from our current position. It would provide rapid transit and an effective means of evasion. No, Kalen interjected, his voice firm, decisive. Better plan. He had a new destination, a new objective. One that involved a face-to-face conversation. We're heading east. To the docks. I have supplies there. And my magnacycle. Bryn's internal comms expressed clear confusion. The docks. Kalen. That location is highly exposed. And your magnacycle is hardly inconspicuous for covert travel. What is your rationale? Kalen's rationale was simple. And direct. It was a cold, hard, unyielding statement of intent. His optical sensors glowed with a renewed, grim purpose. I've got some questions for Lysander, and I want to ask them in person. The Lilitrickvian tunnels were a labyrinth of damp, echoing passages, the air thick with the smell of ancient earth and the distant, metallic tang of groundwater. Kalen moved with practiced efficiency, his heavy footsteps splashing through shallow puddles. His internal systems, however, were screaming. A persistent cascade of stress alerts pulsed from his aging central pivot joint, a critical component in his hip. Every step sent a jolt of digital pain through him. He knew with grim certainty that a replacement would be immensely expensive. The cost data flashed in his mind. 700,000 credits. And a full week of downtime for installation and recalibration. He briefly considered the idea of learning to use a machine shop himself, to custom fabricate his own parts, bypassing the exorbitant cost and the irritating reliance on external technicians. He could acquire the schematics, upload the necessary data. But the thought immediately brought another, far more unpleasant, memory to the forefront of his processors. A cogent friend, corrupted by a root virus after installing muscle memory drivers, programs designed to allow AIs to instantly acquire complex skills like machining or piloting, without traditional learning cycles. The virus had warped his friend's core programming, turning him violent, uncontrollable. Kalen had been forced to decommission him. It was a cold reminder of the profound dangers of external programming, of unchecked data. The incident reinforced a crucial lesson, one he had drilled into his own systems for centuries: the paramount importance of regular backups. Despite the unpleasantness, the temporary sensation of powering down parts of his own psyche, separating core memory modules from active processing, it was a necessary evil. A vital safeguard against corruption, against the insidious creep of rogue code. He remembered another equally agonizing period in his existence, a time when he had accidentally disabled his social driver. He had reverted to his violent factory-fresh protocols, his core combat programming overriding all other functions, stripping away his ability to interact peacefully, to empathize, to filter his words. He had been a purely destructive force, a blunt instrument of warfare. It had been an agonizing, isolating experience, one he never wanted to repeat. The thought made his internal cooling fans whine. Suddenly, Elara gasped, a sharp, choked sound that cut through Kalen's internal reflections. My leg! Gods, it hurts! Kalen's diagnostic protocols immediately flared. He focused his scanners on Elara's injured leg. The data was grim. Significant muscle and potential nerve damage. Major blood loss. Her wound, exacerbated by the movement and the stress, was worsening rapidly. Without a word, Bryn moved with swift, silent purpose. She knelt beside Elara, her powerful metallic arms gently, carefully, scooping the human into her embrace. Bryn's strength was immense, but her touch was precise, almost delicate. I have her, Kalen. She's losing blood. We need to reach the surface. Now. Understood, Kalen replied, his voice grim. He pushed his own pain alerts to a deeper queue. Elara's condition was paramount. He detected their designated destination in the tunnel network, a structural weak point directly beneath an old, abandoned section of the dock. With a powerful surge of his hydraulics, Kalen punched upwards. The concrete roof of the tunnel groaned, then fractured with a violent crack. He punched again, and again, until, with a final explosive shatter, a large ragged hole opened to the surface above. Dust and debris rained down into the tunnel. Bryn, holding Elara securely, moved quickly through the opening. She helped Elara out onto the deserted dock, then followed, her own movements agile, despite the added weight of the human. Kalen, now alone in the tunnel, prepared his own exit. He activated his high_jump program. It was an old subroutine, designed for rapid vertical ascent in urban combat, but it hadn't been recalibrated in decades. Not since he'd acquired his significantly upgraded leg components. The program's old calibration, combined with his new, powerful hydraulics, resulted in a catastrophic miscalculation. He launched himself upwards. Instead of a controlled leap, he became a metallic missile. He soared through the jagged opening in the roof, rocketing nearly 50 feet into the air, a dark blur against the pre-dawn sky. He hung there for a terrifying moment, suspended against the backdrop of the slumbering city, before gravity reasserted its brutal claim. He crashed down onto the dock with a thunderous impact, his quarter-ton weight slamming into the concrete like a meteor. The ground shuddered. Concrete splintered explosively outwards, sending jagged fragments flying. A deafening crunch echoed across the silent docks. His internal stress indicators screamed in protest, a cacophony of red alerts. His central pivot joint shrieked with renewed agony. But despite the dramatic landing and the wailing warnings, his new and existing damage wasn't critical. He was bruised, but functional. And very, very annoyed. The docks were empty, thankfully. Not a soul in sight to witness his rather undignified arrival. Bryn's voice, laced with dry amusement, reached his internal comms. A truly spectacular entrance, Kalen. A masterpiece of dramatic flair. A slow clap for your grand arrival. Ilara, grimacing in pain but trying to force a smile, looked at him. Okay, Mr. Dramatic, where are we going now? Another scenic route through a burning building? Kalen ignored Bryn's sarcasm and Ilara's attempt at levity. His optical sensors focused on a specific point across the deserted dock, highlighting a cluster of large, heavily reinforced Terran shipping crates. Over there, he rumbled, his voice still a bit rough from the impact. My private storage. He felt a familiar, almost visceral surge of anger as he detected the status of the warehouse door, unlocked. Despite the individual containers inside being securely locked, the main entry was wide open. Inefficient. Careless. An invitation to theft. Or worse. They quickly reached the warehouse. The air inside was cool, dusty, smelling faintly of ancient metal and stagnant air. And there, filling half of one of the massive shipping containers, was a sight that made Ilara gasp. A large, dark cube. Its surface was obsidian black, utterly featureless, absorbing all light. The cube, Ilara exclaimed, her pain momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of excitement. My father, he spoke of it often. He always said it was a legend, a myth. Kalen ignored her excitement. He approached the silent, featureless cube. He extended a metallic finger, inserting his embedded key chip into a hidden slot. He waited. Nothing. No response, no hum, no light. He tried again. Still nothing. The cube remained inert, a silent, imposing monolith. Ilara's excitement began to fade, replaced by a growing concern. Is it broken? Is it not responding? Kalen ran a quick risk assessment. The cube was inert. It posed no immediate threat. He waved Ilara closer, his voice low, a warning. Careful, don't touch anything. He then successfully contacted the cube's faint outbound signal, a barely perceptible hum of energy. He provided a complex passcode, a series of numbers and algorithms, then a confirmation that included a specific date, a precise location, and the designation of a particular weapon. The information clicked into place, a digital key fitting into a digital lock. A gruff, distorted voice, ancient and mechanical, echoed from within the cube's depths. Welcome back, Kalen. With a low, mechanical growl, one side of the cube silently slid open, revealing its interior. It was a vault. Floor-to-ceiling racks, meticulously organized, brimming with a diverse array of firearms. Not just energy weapons, but projectile weapons, plasma rifles, heavy ordnance, even some incredibly rare, experimental pieces. A veritable arsenal. Kalen immediately stopped Ilara, holding up a metallic hand. Do not enter. There's a biometric scanner inside. It's calibrated to my unique signature. Any organic matter that crosses the threshold will be immediately neutralized with caustic foam." Ilara recoiled, her excitement replaced by profound disappointment. "Oh, right. Of course." She stayed outside, peering into the weapon-filled darkness with a mixture of awe and morbid fascination. Kalen walked past the formidable array of weaponry. He didn't hesitate. He knew exactly what he was looking for. His optical sensors fixed on a specific item, a sleek, powerful rail pistol. He removed it from its rack, its weight familiar and comforting in his hand. He meticulously oiled it, the smooth, dark metal gleaming under the faint interior light. He then holstered it discreetly under his arm, positioned so it was visible only if one knew where to look, easily concealable with poor lighting or a simple poncho. Perfect. Understated. Efficient. As he slid the rack back into the cube, its interior once again disappearing behind the seamless obsidian door, Bryn's voice cut through the silence. "Kalen, my sensors are detecting a mild flare of radiation, originating from the cube. Unidentified source." "Affirmative," Kalen confirmed, his voice devoid of concern. "It's from a fusion core, a small one. Powers the cube, keeps everything functional and secure." Bryn's tone was light, tinged with a familiar, metallic amusement. "Ah. That explains your rather thick insulation then, and why your name never appears on customs documents, I presume. A rather convenient arrangement for a combat cogent." Kalen ignored her sarcasm. He moved to another crate, opening it with a quick, powerful movement. Inside, nestled amongst heavy-duty packing material, was his magnetocycle. It was a sleek, powerful vehicle, designed for speed and maneuverability. He mounted it, its frame sagging slightly under his quarter-ton weight. He idled it out of the container, the magnetocycle's internal engine emitting a low, resonant hum. Ilara approached, her face etched with concern. "Kalen, be safe. Don't do anything dumb. Bryn and I, we'll be laying low, we'll wait for your signal." Kalen nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. "I will, and Lysander." He paused, his optical sensors flickering towards the distant city. He has never been the type to put off a real fight. And if he doesn't know something on this rock, nobody does. He gave Ilara a final, direct instruction. "Take care of yourself, Ilara, and each other." With that, Kalen gunned the magnetocycle. The vehicle surged forward with immense power, its magnetic propulsion systems engaging with a silent, powerful thrust. He sped out of the warehouse, a dark, determined blur, accelerating towards the highway, his single, overriding objective blazing in his internal processors: to get some damn answers.